I collapsed, my fingers clawing frantically at the expensive Persian rug as my lungs slammed shut like steel doors. Air became the most expensive luxury on earth. Right in front of me, just inches away, Chloe, the family's golden child, was dangling my life-saving inhaler in her hand like a hypnotic pendulum. She wasn't scared. She was smiling, a cold, cruel, amused little smile. "Gasp, loser," she whispered, her sweet, poison-laced voice cutting through the pathetic wheezing coming from my chest. Behind her, on the imported Italian leather sofa, my parents, Richard and Madeline, sat stone still. They watched me struggle for my life like they were watching a boring, annoying play they were forced to sit through. That was the moment I learned the hardest lesson of being human. You can literally suffocate to death in front of your own family, and they will just call it being dramatic. 19 years have passed since that fateful afternoon. I thought I had buried that memory under layers of time and distance until I saw that exact moment again. But this time, it wasn't happening in a living room stifled by the smell of lilies. It was playing on a sharp 4K screen in a cold Seattle courtroom. And right before the video ended, something none of us were prepared for happened, flipping the entire game board. My name is Harper Sterling. For most of my life, I believed silence was the price of survival. But today, the silence ends. Let me tell you how a loser came back from the dead to bring down an entire empire of lies. I grew up in a Victorian-style mansion in the Seattle suburbs, where everything always looked suspiciously perfect. The hedges were trimmed as straight as a ruler, the windows sparkled against the gray northwest sky, and the porch was always decorated by my mother for every holiday season. But to me, it wasn't a home. It was a staged set, where the air inside was always thinner, tighter, like you had to pay a tax for every breath you took. Madeline, my mother, didn't run the house like a mom. She ran it like a ruthless CEO managing a failing corporation. She was strict, polished, and accepted zero errors. My father, Richard, was a man who believed peace was kept by never picking a side, even though his silence was a brutal form of complicity. And then there was Chloe, the spoiled golden child they always made excuses for, saying she just needed a little extra attention. They never asked what I needed. The older I got, the quieter I became. Not because I didn't have a voice, but because I learned that my sound only caused trouble. At dinners, when Chloe rambled on about meaningless school projects, my parents' faces lit up like headlights. But the moment I spoke, the energy in the room shifted. Madeline would stiffen. Richard would glance at the wall clock, and the conversation would glide over me like I was a ghost. By 16, I was a master of the art of disappearing. The only person who really saw me was Grandma Margaret. She smelled like dried lavender and old books. With her, I wasn't dramatic or difficult. I was simply Harper. Weekends escaping to her house were the only antidote that helped me survive the cold shoulder of my own family. It all started on a regular Tuesday evening, the kind of quiet night where you almost trick yourself into believing the past can't touch you. Portland had become my blank slate, a city where no one called me dramatic, difficult, or too much. Here, I was a strategic consultant, cool, decisive, and independent. But the law of conservation of energy applies to the truth, too. What is buried never dies. It just waits to claw its way out. I got back to my penthouse after a long day at the office, kicked off my Jimmy Choo heels, poured a glass of red wine, and started flipping through the mail on the kitchen counter. Bills, flyers, charity requests. And then, a pale yellow envelope that froze me mid-sip. It was a subpoena. The cold legal document ordered me to appear in a Seattle court as a witness for a defamation lawsuit. Chloe Sterling Monroe versus Rebecca Torres. For a moment, my brain refused to process the name. Chloe Sterling Monroe. my sister's name, now attached to her husband's last name, printed arrogantly at the top of the page. I hadn't spoken to her, or my parents, in 3 years. I had built a fortress around my life, cutting all lines of communication. But now, the law was ruthlessly dragging me back into the toxic orbit I had spent half my life escaping. I set the subpoena down on the cold marble counter, telling myself to breathe. I didn't know who Rebecca Torres was. I didn't know what Chloe had done or what victim she was playing this time. But a deep instinct in my chest, an old, bruised instinct that never really healed, started to throb. It was the feeling prey gets when it smells a predator nearby. That night, I did something I had forbidden myself from doing for years. I opened my laptop and typed my sister's name into the search bar. That night, the cold blue light from the laptop screen was the only thing illuminating my large apartment. Finding information wasn't hard. Rebecca Torres wasn't a nobody. She was a well-known creative director, and her blog post was going viral in Seattle media circles. I skimmed through the accusations. Chloe was still the same Chloe, stealing ideas, spreading rumors, isolating colleagues in important meetings. Classic office politics that she had perfected since she was a kid on the middle school playground. I was about to close the laptop, thinking this was just a petty battle between ambitious people, until my eyes stopped at the very last paragraph. It read, "Chloe Monroe has a pattern of cruel behavior spanning decades. Don't buy the saintly woman act. Ask her sister about the asthma incident at 17. Ask why the Sterling family spent 10 years ensuring no one believed her." My breath caught in my throat. I read that line 3 times, my hand gripping the mouse so hard my knuckles turned white. No outsider was allowed to know about that day. The scene of me kneeling on the rug, lungs collapsing, and Chloe's smile. That was the darkest secret buried under the foundation of the Sterling house. For 19 years they had gaslit me, telling me I remembered it wrong, that I was paranoid, that I was too sensitive. But someone knew. Someone had seen the naked truth without looking through Madeline's distorted lens. Fragments of memories started floating up like wreckage from a sunken ship. College letters hidden, calls blocked, systematic isolation. The text on the screen wasn't just an accusation, it was a match thrown into a powder keg. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I realized I wasn't crazy. And more importantly, I wasn't alone. Before I reveal who this unexpected ally is and how we flipped the script, I want to ask you something. Have you ever known for a fact that you were right, but your entire family teamed up to say you were wrong? If the answer is yes, leave a comment below. You are not alone. I picked up my phone, my finger hovering over the corporate lawyer's number. My survival instinct told me to find a way out of testifying, to run like I always did. But then I stopped. The Sterling family had spent nearly 20 years making sure I had no voice. What would happen if, this time, instead of defending, I decided to attack? I slammed my briefcase shut and instead opened my laptop to find a name I hadn't typed in years. Someone who once said I saved her life, and now, maybe she was the only one who could help me reclaim mine. Her name was Mia Lawson. In high school, Mia was the quiet girl who always hugged an old laptop and avoided eye contact with the mean girl squad circling Chloe. Back then, Mia was pushed out of every group, mocked for her cheap clothes, ignored whenever she spoke. I didn't have the power to stop it all, but I did the only thing I could. I sat and ate lunch with Mia when no one else would. Years later, Mia had become a legend in the information security world in Portland. She was a digital forensics specialist, someone who spent her days recovering deleted data, stitching together digital footprints that people thought were buried forever at the bottom of the internet. When I called, Mia didn't hesitate. Her voice over the phone was still calm, but much sharper than before. "Bring whatever you have," she said briefly. "If they deleted you, we'll recover you." 2 days later, I walked into Mia's office. The space was small but filled with the low hum of cooling fans. Black screens glowed with scrolling lines of code, processors stacked neatly on cold metal shelves. This was where the truth couldn't disappear just because someone with money or power wanted it to. The confidence radiating from Mia reassured me in a way I didn't think I needed anymore. I reached into my bag, my fingers touching the cold plastic surface of the only piece of evidence I took when I left home at 18. A flimsy DVD inside a yellowed paper sleeve. On the disc, Chloe's handwriting in black marker read, "Family Memories 2004. I had never dared to watch it. Just touching it made my fingertips numb. Mia took the disc with latex gloves, handling it carefully like she was defusing a bomb. "Let's see what your family accidentally saved," she muttered, sliding the disc into a specialized drive. The large wall monitor flickered, then showed the image of my childhood living room. The shaky, grainy video quality of the 2000s. At first it was Chloe giggling as she zoomed in on her own face in the black reflection of the TV. My stomach twisted. But then, the angle changed. The camera was set down on a table, the lens pointing straight at the rug. And then, that sound rang out. Wheezing. The sound of my lungs trying to suck in thin sips of air, sounding like metal scraping against glass. In the frame, my hand appeared, clawing desperately at the floor. Then Chloe's voice cut through the air, sharp and cruel. "Look at her. She looks pathetic." The inhaler swung in the corner of the screen, right within reach, but too far away. Chloe stepped forward, blocking my path. Behind her, on the sofa, Madeline and Richard sat motionless like wax figures. I swallowed hard, my palms sweating cold. "Enough," I whispered, my voice cracking. But Mia didn't turn it off. Her eyes were glued to another window of code running parallel to the video. "Harper," she said, her voice ice cold. "This disk doesn't just contain video. It contains the automatic email backups from the family computer when Chloe burned the DVD." Mia opened a file. An email subject line appeared, sent from Madeline to Chloe, 2 days after the incident. "Delete the video and don't mention anything to Grandma. We need to save face." Another email from Chloe. "I handled it. I told Grandma that Harper was throwing a tantrum again and refused to come downstairs." Madeline replied, "Good. Keep it up. Don't let her ruin your image. There is too much at stake." I felt something inside my chest collapse. Not sadness, but the last shred of innocence I had left. This wasn't careless neglect. This was strategy. 19 years of my life had been rewritten by people who shared my last name, systematically and with calculation. I stood up straight, wiping away tears that hadn't fallen yet. "We're taking this to court," I said. Mia nodded, hitting the enter key hard. "And Harper, this time, you're not the one who should be afraid." The morning of the hearing, I felt like I was stepping into an alternate reality. The Seattle courthouse towered with cold lines of glass and steel, reflecting a gray sky undecided between rain and sun. I pulled my coat tight, letting the chilly spring air slide over my skin as I walked through the revolving doors. Every step on the marble floor sounded like a confirmation of the truth I had lost 19 years believing was real. Inside, the courtroom was filled with calculating whispers. When the heavy mahogany doors opened, my family walked in. Chloe looked terrifyingly perfect. Hair subtly curled, a tailored suit, light makeup creating the look of a successful but vulnerable businesswoman. Behind her was Madeline with a calm smile, the kind she reserved for charity tea parties. Richard came last, hands in his pockets, eyes on the floor like he was looking for an invisible exit. When Chloe saw me sitting in the witness area, her face froze for a split second. But quickly, her lawyer whispered something, and she regained her fake confidence. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Chloe took the stand like she owned the atmosphere. With a rehearsed, shaky voice, she talked about her career, her reputation, and the trauma Rebecca Torres had caused. I sat there, watching her lay every brick of her tower of lies, and then her lawyer launched the deciding attack aimed at me. Your Honor, the plaintiff wishes to demonstrate that these allegations stem from the fabrications of a witness with a history of mental instability, my client's sister. The courtroom stirred. Chloe didn't look at me, but I saw her jaw tighten. She was planning to use me as a shield once again. My heart pounded, but not from fear. Thanks to Mia, I knew that the truth didn't need acting. It just needed light. Ms. Sterling, Chloe's lawyer continued, his voice condescending. Is it true you have cut off contact with your family for years? Yes, I answered briefly. And do you admit that your memories might be distorted by unresolved psychological trauma? No, I said, my voice so calm it made him pause. My memories are affected by what actually happened. He smirked. Didn't your family always worry about your mental instability since you were a child? They worried behind my back, I retorted, looking straight at Madeline. Never to my face and never with a professional medical diagnosis. That wasn't concern. That was a gaslighting tactic. Murmurs began to spread through the room. My lawyer stood up. Your Honor, the defense wishes to submit a set of documents authenticated by a digital forensics expert. The judge nodded. Proceed. Mia stepped up to the large screen. With a few decisive keystrokes, she displayed the first email. The timestamp glowed in the corner like a death sentence. Sender: Madeline. Recipient: Chloe. Content. Delete the video and don't mention anything to Grandma. We need to save face. Gasps of shock rang out. Chloe leaned forward, her face draining of blood. That is taken out of context. Mia clicked again. Sender: Chloe. Content. I handled it. I told Grandma Harper was acting up again. She believed it completely. Sender: Madeline. Content. Good. Keep going. Too much is at stake. The judge raised a hand, looking down at the plaintiff with eyes sharp as knives. Ms. Monroe, you will remain silent while evidence is presented. Chloe shrank back into her chair, eyes wide, breathing getting heavy. And then, the sentence I had waited 19 years to hear was spoken by someone with authority. Before we continue, the judge said, his cold voice echoing in the dead silent room, let's watch that family video. My stomach twisted, not with fear but with a dark excitement. The truth was no longer my burden alone. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. On the big screen the shaky footage appeared. Me at 17, collapsing onto the rug, fingers desperately reaching for the inhaler. The sound, amplified by the court's surround sound system, was more horrifying than ever. Lungs wheezing like a saw cutting wood, air blocked in a throat, fingernails scratching on the floor. Then Chloe's voice rang out, clear and cruel as an ice blade. Gasp, loser. The whole courtroom held its breath. A few people in the gallery covered their mouths. On the screen, my parents still sat on the sofa, eyes glued to the TV, completely indifferent to their daughter dying at their feet. The judge clenched his jaw. Rebecca's lawyer stared at the screen, face full of disgust. Even Richard had to close his eyes, shame radiating off him like heat waves. But not Madeline. She stared at the screen with icy stillness, unblinking. The video ended with Chloe hiding the inhaler behind her back and smiling at the camera. The silence that followed was so heavy I could hear the electricity buzzing in the ceiling lights. Chloe shot up, stumbling. This is edited. This isn't. But her voice cracked. Her hands shook violently. And then, exactly as a narcissist backed into a corner does, she started screaming frantically. You people don't understand. You don't know what she's like. She was always in my way. Mom said. Mom told me. Ms. Monroe, the judge shouted, the gavel slamming down like a gunshot. Sit down. Chloe's screaming dissolved into panicked sobs. Madeline reached out to touch her daughter, But Chloe jerked away, unraveling in front of everyone. For the first time in my life, I watched the truth strip away every layer of their shiny disguise. The judge cleared his throat, looking straight at my family. Based on the emails, video evidence, and documented behavioral patterns, the court finds the plaintiff's accusations completely baseless. Furthermore, the evidence suggests a pattern of severe and prolonged psychological abuse. The judge's gavel hit the wood, sounding like the slamming of the dungeon door that had trapped me for 2 decades. I exhaled, and for the first time in 19 years, the air filling my lungs felt sweet, free, and no longer tasted like fear. The civil proceedings that followed were like a storm sweeping away the fake ruins of the Sterling family. The judge reviewed Grandma's will, cross-referencing every email Mia recovered. Chloe was forced to pay back nearly $180,000, money she had laundered through mansion renovations and cars. But the fatal blow to a narcissist like Chloe wasn't financial. It was the collapse of her ego. Her husband filed for separation. Her company fired her for ethical scandals. By mid-summer, the Golden Girl was alone in a shabby rental apartment, with no audience left to watch her perform. Madeline didn't lose money. She lost the thing she worshipped more than life: her perfect mask. Church groups, high society tea parties. They all slammed their doors in her face. She went from the center of admiration to the subject of whispered scorn every time she stepped outside. As for Richard, he came to me one last time, shoulders slumped in belated regret. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I looked at the man who chose silence over protecting his daughter and replied with necessary coldness, "You should have apologized when I was suffocating on the floor." I turned my back and walked away, leaving him drowning in the silence he once enabled. I used the recovered inheritance money to start the Margaret Carter Foundation, providing legal support for victims of psychological domestic abuse. In the end, I learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by the people who see your pain and choose to stay. The past doesn't disappear, but it's no longer my jailer. If Harper Sterling's story gave you the satisfaction of seeing justice served, hit that subscribe button right now. There are plenty more entitled people out there who need to be taught a lesson, and I'll tell you all about it. See you in the next video.